Okay, so we're in the Gemara Avodah Daf 35. So one can learn by inference from here that with regard to animals from which derived benefit is prohibited, their excrement, which is the content of their stomach, is permitted. Although deriving benefit from both a burnt offering and an unslaughtered animal carcass is prohibited, the excrement of each is permitted. So similarly, although deriving benefit from an ox that is to be stoned is prohibited, its excrement is permitted. And from the fact that Rabbi Yehoshua said to Rabbi Yishmael, cheese of Gentiles is prohibited because they curdle it with the stomach contents of calves used for idol worship, and that Rabbi Yishmael responded to him, if that is so, why didn't the sages prohibit deriving benefit from the cheese? One may learn by inference that with regard to animals of idol worship, their excrement is prohibited. Since the cheese formed with stomach contents of an animal of idol worship is prohibited, it is evident that the excrement formed in the stomach of such an animal is also prohibited. The Mishnah related that rather than addressing Rabbi Yishmael's final difficulty, Rabbi Yehoshua diverted his attention to another matter. The Gemara inquires, but let him respond to Rabbi Yishmael's query by explaining the sages did not prohibit deriving benefit from cheese curdled in the stomach contents of an animal used for idolatry because there is no substantive prohibited entity in such cheese. The Gemara reinforces its question. After all, isn't the halakha with regard to fish stew, according to the opinion of the rabbis, as application of this rationale, as they did not prohibit deriving benefit from fish stew prepared by a Gentile? What is the reason for this leniency? Is it not because there is no substantive prohibited entity in it? Although fish stew may contain the wine of a Gentile, deriving benefit from it is not prohibited because the wine is not discernible. Why didn't Rabbi Yehoshua explain that deriving benefit from cheese of a Gentile is similarly permitted because it contains no substantive prohibited entity? The Gemara rejects this possibility. The sages say in response that here, with regard to cheese, since the rennet curdles it, it is considered like an item that contained a substantive prohibited entity. Although the prohibited rennet is not discernible in the cheese, it is nevertheless considered a substantive prohibited entity because it is essential to the formation of the cheese. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Yehoshua diverted Rabbi Yishmael's attention to another matter and began discussing the verse, quote, for your love is better than wine, Song of Songs 1:2. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the verse, quote, for your love is better than wine? That's Dodecha. So when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said, the congregation of Israel said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, the statements of your beloved ones, or Dodecha, that is the sages, are more pleasant to me than the wine of the written Torah itself. The Gemara asks, what is different about this verse that led Rabbi Yehoshua to ask Rabbi Yishmael a question specifically with regard to it? So Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said, and some say Rabbi Shimon bar Ami said, he chose that verse because he sought to tell him a message that can be derived from the beginning of the verse, that is, quote, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, Song of Songs 1:2. In essence, Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, Yishmael, my brother, press your lips one to the other and do not be so hasty to retort. That is, do not persist in your questioning. The Gemara asks, what is the reason that Rabbi Yehoshua instructed Rabbi Yishmael not to question further? Ula says, and some say Rav Shmuel bar Abba says, the ordinance prohibiting the cheese of Gentiles was a new decree, and therefore one does not scrutinize its origins. The Gemara asks, what was, in fact, the reason for the sages' decree prohibiting the cheese of Gentiles? Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi says that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says it was due to the concern for puncturing, that is, the concern that a snake might have deposited its venom in the cheese, as Gentiles are not assumed to be careful about this. And this is not talking about snakes. This is figuratively talking about a certain group in a certain spiritual matter. Because as we can see, just like from the stories of, I don't know, what was that, Daf 30 or Daf 31, you have the story about Rabbi Barbachana on a ship, again, his ship stories, and there's a snake that's coming to drink the water, and they throw water out, and it's like so like unworldly. So, the Gemara comments, okay. The Gemara comments, but if so, let Rabbi Yehoshua simply say to Rabbi Yishmael, and I don't know if you noticed that comment from another video, the snake thing, it's depending on the context and how it's spelled, it's potentially a couple different things. If you want to look at it as a people group, it can be Edom, it can be potentially Mitzrayim. Not necessarily saying that in the case of this cheese, but anyway, Gemara comments, but if so, let Rabbi Yehoshua simply say to Rabbi Yishmael, it is prohibited due to the concern for puncturing. So why did he choose to avoid answering? The Gemara explains, Rabbi Yehoshua reasoned in accordance with a statement of Ula, as Ula said, when the sages decreed a decree in the West, meaning Eretz Yisrael, they would not reveal the reason behind it until 12 months of the year had passed, lest there be a person who does not agree with it and will come to treat it with contempt. So Rabbi Yirmiyah would ridicule Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's explanation that the prohibition was due to the concern for puncturing. If that is so, dry cheese should be permitted, and likewise aged cheese should be permitted. As Rabbi Hanina says, with regard to exposure, a dry substance is permitted even if it was originally in the form of an uncovered liquid, because a snake's venom does not let it dry or congeal. And an aged liquid is permitted, as a snake's venom does not let it age, as it causes it to spoil. So the Gemara presents two alternative reasons for this decree of the sages. So Rabbi Hanina says the cheese is prohibited because it is not possible for it to have been made without containing particles of non-kosher milk. And Shmuel says the cheese is prohibited because it is curdled with the skin of the stomach of an unslaughtered animal carcass. So the Gemara comments, Shmuel's statement indicates that only the skin of an animal's stomach is prohibited, whereas the contents of the stomach, the rennet itself, is permitted. The Gemara asks, and did Shmuel actually say this? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah, so Hulin 116a, with regard to the stomach contents of an animal slaughtered by a Gentile and the stomach contents of an unslaughtered animal carcass, each of these is prohibited. And we discussed it and asked, why does the Mishnah mention both an animal slaughtered by a Gentile and an unslaughtered animal carcass? Is that to say that an animal slaughtered by a Gentile is not classified as an animal carcass? By mentioning each of these separately, the Mishnah indicates that generally they are not, By mentioning each of these separately, the Mishnah indicates that generally they are subject to different halachot. So this is difficult, as an animal slaughtered by a Gentile has the halakhic status of an unslaughtered animal carcass. So, and in answer to this difficulty, Shmuel says the Mishnah is in fact teaching a single halacha, which is that the stomach contents of an animal slaughtered by a Gentile are considered to be like the stomach contents of an unslaughtered animal carcass, and are therefore prohibited. So earlier, Shmuel asserted that only the physical skin of an animal's stomach is prohibited, which indicates that these stomach contents are permitted. In his explanation in the Mishnah in Hulin, Shmuel posits that the stomach contents of an unslaughtered animal are prohibited. The Gemara explains that this is not difficult. So Amud Beit. So here, with regard to the Mishnah in Hulin, Shmuel's comment reflects the explanation of Rabbi Yehoshua before Rabbi Yehoshua's retraction of the assertion that it is prohibited to derive benefit from the stomach contents of an animal carcass. So there, with regard to the Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, Shmuel's statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua after his retraction of that claim. And although this indicates that the Mishnah in Hulin presents an outdated ruling that was later rescinded, a Mishnah does not move from its place. That is, in other words, once it has been taught in a certain manner, the Tana will not change the text of a Mishnah in order to reflect a change of opinion, so as to avoid confusion. So the Gemara suggests additional reasons for the decree of the sages. So Rav Malkiah says in the name of Rav Ada bar Ahava, the cheese is prohibited because Gentiles smooth its surface with pig fat. So Rav Chisda says it is because they curdled it with vinegar produced from their wine, which is prohibited to derive benefit. And then Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says it is because they curdle it with sap, that is subject to the prohibition against consuming the fruit of a tree during the first 3 years after its planting, so the orla. Parenthetically, the Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is Rav Nachman's claim that the cheese of Gentiles is prohibited because it is curdled in the sap of Orla? So the Gemara answers, it is in accordance with the opinion of this Tana as it is taught in the Mishnah, Orla 1:7. Rabbi Eliezer says, with regard to one who curdles cheese with the sap of Orla, the cheese is prohibited because the sap is considered to be the fruit of the tree. The Gemara comments, you may even say that the statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua, who disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, as Rabbi Yehoshua disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer only with regard to the sap of a branch, but with regard to the sap of a fruit, Rabbi Yehoshua concedes that it is prohibited as Orla. So Rav Nachman's statement can be understood as referring specifically to the sap of the fruit, which would mean that it is in accordance with the opinions of both Rabbis Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. Okay, the Gemara adds, and this is in accordance with that which we learned in the continuation of that Mishnah. Rabbi Yehoshua said, I heard explicitly that with regard to one who curdles cheese with the sap of the leaves and the sap of the roots of an orla tree, the cheese is permitted. But if it is curdled with the sap of unripe figs, it is prohibited, because the sap is considered to be fruit. The Gemara raised a difficulty against the last two suggested reasons for the decree of the sages. According to both Rav Chisda, who holds that cheese is prohibited because it is curdled with vinegar made from wine of Gentiles, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who maintains that it is prohibited because it is curdled with the sap of Orla, one should be prohibited from deriving benefit from the cheese, as one may not derive benefit from either the wine of Gentiles or Orla. So the Gemara concludes, indeed, this is difficult. So Rav Nachman, son of Rav Chisda, interpreted a verse homiletically. What is the meaning of that which is written? Your ointments have a good fragrance. Song of Songs 1:3. This is a metaphor for a Torah scholar. To what is a Torah scholar comparable? To a flask of palatine. When it is exposed, its scent diffuses, and when it is covered, its scent does not diffuse. Okay, the Gemara remarks, and moreover, when a Torah scholar spreads his knowledge, matters that are generally hidden from him are revealed to him, as it is stated, maidens or alamot love you, Song of Songs 1:3. And one may read into the verse the hidden or alumot, and moreover the angel of death loves him, as it is stated, maidens alamot love you. And one may read into the verse the one appointed over death, or almot, loves you. So that's where they get the angel of death. Okay. And moreover, a Torah scholar inherits two worlds, one in this world, and the other one is the world to come, as it is stated, maidens, alamot, love you. And one may read into the verse worlds, or olamot. So, there we go. It's just kind of like a slight variation in vowels, basically, is what it is, with the same consonants. Okay. Back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, this Mishnah lists items belonging to Gentiles which it is prohibited to consume, but from which it is permitted to derive benefit. Actually, I want to read that one statement, go back a little bit more. So, moreover, when a Torah scholar spreads his knowledge, matters that are generally hidden from him are revealed to him. So, yeah, okay. So back to the Mishnah. This Mishnah lists items belonging to Gentiles which it is prohibited to consume, but from which it is permitted to derive benefit. So in these items oh my gosh. And these are items that belong to Gentiles and are prohibited, but their prohibition is not that of an item with which deriving benefit is prohibited. Milk that was milked by a Gentile, and a Jew did not see him performing this action in their bread and oil. The Mishnah notes that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in his court permitted the oil of Gentiles entirely. Okay, the Mishnah resumes its list. In boiled and pickled vegetables, whose usual manner of preparation involves adding wine and vinegar to them, in minced tarit, or fish, and brine that does not have a kilbit fish floating in it, and hilak, and a silver hiltit in salkondit, salt. Okay, all these are prohibited, but their prohibition is not that of item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. So that was The Gemara now says, concerning milk with regard to what need we be concerned? So why is milk prohibited? If it is due to the concern that a Gentile might exchange the milk of a kosher animal with the milk of a non-kosher animal, this concern is unfounded, as kosher milk is white, whereas non-kosher milk has a green tinge to it. Interesting. And therefore they are easily distinguishable. And if it is prohibited due to the concern that it might be mixed with non-kosher milk, let the Jew curdle the milk obtained from the Gentile, as the Master said, milk from a kosher animal curdles, but milk from a non-kosher animal does not curdle. Okay, the Gemara answers, if one desires to eat it as cheese, indeed one can simply curdle it, as milk of non-kosher animals does not curdle. What are we dealing with here? We are dealing with a case where one desires to use the milk in kamcha, also known as kutach, a food item that contains milk. Okay. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but in that case, let him take a bit of milk and curdle it to test whether or not it has been mixed with the milk of a non-kosher animal. If it curdles completely, it is kosher. If some milk is left over, it is not. So the Gemara explains, since there is also whey in kosher milk, which does not curdle, there is no way to establish the halakhic matter with regard to it. Even kosher milk will not curdle completely. Therefore, this is not a reliable method to determine the halakhic status of the milk. The Gemara presents an alternative suggestion. And if you wish, say instead that you may even say that the concern applies where he intends to use the milk to make cheese, as there is milk that remains between the crevices of curdled cheese. And therefore, there is a concern that drops of non-kosher milk might be mixed with it. So the Mishnah teaches, and bread belonging to Gentiles is prohibited for consumption. So Rav Kahana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, like what? Unlike oil, bread was not permitted by a court. The Gemara asks, from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan states that bread was not permitted in court, can it be inferred that there is a different opinion that claims that a court did permit it? The Gemara answers yes, as when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi went out to the field, and a Gentile brought before him a seah of bread baked in a large baker's oven. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, how exquisite is this loaf of bread? What did the sages see that caused them to prohibit it? The Gemara asks incredulously, what did the sages see? Again, they're asking this question. That caused them to prohibit it. It was prohibited due to the concern that Jews might befriend Gentiles while baking bread with them, which could lead to marriage with Gentiles. The Gemara explains that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was not asking why bread was prohibited in general. Rather, he asked, what did the sages see that caused them to prohibit bread even in the field, where this concern does not apply? The Gemara notes that upon hearing this incident, the people thought that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi permitted the bread of Gentiles, but that is not so. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did not actually permit such bread. This is why Rabbi Yochanan emphasized that the bread of Gentiles was never permitted by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's court. The Gemara records an alternative version of this episode. Rav Yosef, and some say Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, says the incident did not occur in this manner. Rather, they said, once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi went to a certain place and saw that bread was scarce for the students in the study hall. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, is there no baker here who can prepare bread? Upon hearing of this incident, the people thought to say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was referring to a Gentile baker, which would indicate that bread baked by a professional baker is permitted even if he is a Gentile. But in reality, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi stated his question only in reference to a Jewish baker. The Gemara cites two qualifications of the leniency that people inferred from the above incident. So Rabbi Helbo said, even according to one who thought to say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was referring to a Gentile baker, we said that the bread is permitted only where there is no Jewish baker, but in a place where there is a Jewish baker, the leniency would certainly not apply. And Rabbi Yochanan said, even according to the one who thought to say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was referring to a Gentile baker, that statement applies only in the field, but in the city it would not apply, and the bread would still be prohibited due to the possibility of marriage with a Gentile. The Gemara relates, I'm sorry, it's like way past midnight. The Gemara relates, hold on a second. Avu would bite and eat bread of Gentiles at the borders of the fields. Rava said to the students in the study hall, and some say that it was Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak who said to them, "Do not speak with Avu, as he eats bread of Armenians in deliberate violation of a rabbinic decree." The Mishnah teaches, and their oil was originally prohibited, but later permitted by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and his court. The Gemara cites a dispute with regard to the origin of the prohibition of oil. So Rav says Daniel decreed that oil is prohibited, and Shmuel says, and then we have to wait for tomorrow's daf. So thanks for watching.